Right, today I'm joined by Dominic Ryder, who is the founder and CEO of MAChange, which is the first fully integrated crisis management platform. Dominic, hello, how are you?
I'm very well, thank you. Thank you for having me on your YouTube program. Very exciting. So yeah, we are the first fully integrated crisis management platform in the UK, which is driven from experience. So I'm happy to answer any questions that you might have got.
Yeah, excellent, excellent. But let's get going. And I mean, first of all, what constitutes as a crisis?
That's a really interesting question because it depends from individual to individual. So yeah, people have different tolerances for different levels of crisis. So you know, on one end of the spectrum, it can be a life-changing event. It can be a terrible bereavement. It can be an event in a career that can terminate a career. It can be an addiction problem. Or it simply could be a marriage situation that flares up. And it really, I would say a crisis really depends on the individual, and it depends on the individual's ability to handle that crisis at that particular moment in time. So for example, something could crop up which normally you would just deal with as a run-of-the-mill situation. But maybe because you've got other things going on in your life at that time, it does become a crisis and it becomes much more difficult to deal with. So I think the simple answer is it depends. It depends on the individual, and it depends really on the nature of what's happening at the time. But every single crisis is different, and how we all respond to those crises is different. So it's very difficult to generalize. All I can say is it's something that, if not dealt with properly, can become debilitating and actually can force an individual's body to shut down, and basically it can paralyze you. So it depends on the individual and the circumstances.
And obviously you've just touched on it there a little bit, but what can be the impact on a person, individual, and indeed an organisation?
Yeah, it's sometimes it can creep. So one of our businesses is looking after fund managers in the city. So a crisis there can just niggle at performance. You could just lose that edge, and I think it's similar in football. You could just lose that edge. You could just lose that concentration because you're thinking about other things. And that if that happens, you can probably recover from that relatively straightforwardly. However, at the most severe end, it can actually cause a total shutdown, a total breakdown. And that's a worst case situation. But we know people that have had adverse situations that have not left their house for 12 months, that can't face the world, and generally it can be a combination of different things, and it can be a relatively small thing that pushes somebody over the edge. So it generally, I think people can handle one or two things relatively well. But it's that third thing or fourth thing that comes in, that can create the total shutdown. But again, it depends on the individual. And what we can't say is one crisis is more or less important than another. So if you're an elite sports person and your performance drops by 10%, that's a real crisis, and the fans will notice that. And so there's varying degrees, but I would never be judgmental on impact, because an impact again depends on the individual.
And so, in the event of a crisis occurring, what's the initial steps that someone should take?
And again, this is really born out of my own experience, and this is the processes that we've put in place at Material Adverse Change. It's really thinking clearly under pressure. So when a crisis event occurs or strikes, however you want to describe it, it's really thinking, what do I need to do? How do I do it? Who do I speak to? And what we try and do is put that wrapper around people. So we have their phone number. The people on the other end of the phone, in many cases, have been through some form of crisis, and we need to have empathy for people. So really, what we try and do is take away or put a wrapper around that thought process for people. So I can't. A crisis happens. Normally, you would stew on it. You'd think about it. You might talk to your missus, but if your missus is involved in a crisis, it's hard to do that. You might talk to family. You might talk to work colleagues. But again, if you've got those people that are involved in that, if you look at a football situation, it may be very difficult to speak to your colleagues or the management structure. And that's what I learned in crisis, is having somebody that you can speak to that gives structure, and then that structure can lead on to the advice, is very, very important, because just the advice in itself is great, but it takes a process to get to getting that right advice. So there's plenty of great lawyers, there's plenty of great counsellors out there, but actually getting the right person to advise you at that right moment in time is very, very important. So thinking clearly is great, but you're often not able to do that when you're under pressure. And what we do at MAChange is really try and think clearly under pressure for people that are in crisis.
Yeah. Do you want to talk to me a little bit about MAChange? It's a full service agency developed for crisis management. Can you just explain?
Yeah. I went through a situation, almost 10 years ago now, which involved, I'm a banker by training. I got involved in structuring large tax deals. And we had a situation where we were wrongly accused of basically committing fraud. And there was a criminal investigation. And we dealt with it, but it took a long time to deal with. And at the end of that process, I thought, well, actually, I need to take some positives out of this and try and do something with what I've learned as part of this process. And what I realized at that point was there wasn't anybody that you can speak to the general crisis advice. There's plenty of fantastic lawyers out there or advisors, but you've got to have been able to navigate your way through the process to select them. And even then, all a lawyer can advise you on is the law. They can't advise you on how you feel. They can't advise you on the fact that you may be having some suicidal thoughts or some mental health issues. And that was the difficult thing. So what we've tried to do with MAChange is formalise the process of dealing with crisis and open up. And I think one of the key tenets of our business is we just accept crisis happens. It's not something that might happen, it will happen. And we all have crises in our lives. And generally, 9 times out of 10, we just get on with it, we deal with it, and we move on. But there are times when something will happen that will so surprise you, so shock you, that it can debilitate you. And all we've tried to do is put together a process that takes people by the hand in the event that there is some issue. And then we're basically the bridge to a team of professionals that can give them the right advice. So, for example, obviously we have lawyers, we have PR people, we have mental health people, we also have addiction people, because there's lots of really good things to help people that are in the middle of a serious addiction problem. But there's not too much help obviously available. The people that are sat at home that actually, I think I'm drinking a bit too much here, or I'm doing a few things that I shouldn't do. It's not yet a crisis, but is there somebody that I can talk to in a confidential way? So it's things like that. And what we're trying to do is just put that support wrapper around people. So when something happens, they know they've got a process. So it's very simple. We give them a membership. They have sort of a very clear number to phone in the event there is a problem. That's manned 24/7, and obviously we're geared up to get calls in the middle of the night. I think many of the problems that we have probably longer term, and we're very happy to accept calls in the middle of the night, and you know, really put an emergency plan in place in the event that there is a crisis. And it's very simple, but it's surprisingly, it almost surprises you that it wasn't there. So you know, there's these, you can get a phone number to book a holiday, you can get a phone number to buy a car, but there isn't, up until now, a phone number you could call when your life is disintegrating around you. And that's what we do. So
let's end on, and how do people get in touch with you? What is the phone number? What's the web address? How do people get in touch?
We'll put the details up at the end of this video. Yeah, and my personal email address is there. Very, very happy to have people email me, and I'll put up my mobile number as well. People can contact me, have a chat, and just begin to understand it a little bit, because it's new. And part of our challenge in how we market this is, it's the old Henry Ford saying, if I'd done market research, people would have said they wanted a faster horse and cart. And with what we're doing, it's new. It can be challenging. It can be facing up to things that people are a little bit ashamed of, maybe. And we just want an open, honest discussion. So all the details will be up at the end of this video. Very happy to take as many calls as people want, just to give me a shout.
Excellent. Thank you, Dominic. That was a brilliant introduction to crisis management, MAChange, etc. And we hope that people, if they are in a situation, that they get in touch with you straight away, and we can navigate their way through this. Okay.
Yeah, and just one final thing. I think in many cases, just having an empathetic voice on the end of the phone takes a long way. It takes people a long way to dealing with whatever issue that they've got.
Excellent. All right. Thank you, Dominic.
Thanks very much.